Welcome, everybody, to the May episode of the South Dakota Forest Health Workshop. My name is Tony Seidel, your moderator, and we're joined as always by your host, Dr. John Ball. This month's episode focuses on the topic of emerald ash borer and pine wilt disease management. Both of these issues are seen in our state. Emerald ash borer being a non-native insect that affects our native ash trees, and pine wilt disease being a native issue that affects our non-native pine trees in the area. Dr. Ball is going to go over what we can do when we have these issues on our properties and our trees. And we'll have some time at the end of the conversation for some discussion. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to add that in our chat box. Additionally, if you are a certified forester through the Society of American Forestry, please put your credentials in the chat box as both certified foresters and certified arborists are eligible for a CEU credit. For ISA certified arborists, I'm going to do something a little different this time. If you are an ISA certified arborist, please put your chat in the chat box. Since I'm submitting my own CEUs, I can just put the list of all the credentials in that same post approval portal through the ISA website. So if you are an ISA certified arborist and you want a CEU for listening to this live presentation, please put your credentials in the chat box this month, and we'll give that a try. Additionally, this workshop is being recorded. The recording will be posted on our YouTube channel for later viewing. I'll put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat box as well. We have all of our past workshops, all of those except for any repeated topics. We tend to hit the same topics year over year, so we update that as it goes. But there is about 15 videos on that playlist for you to learn more about our South Dakota trees and the problems they face. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ball. Dr. Ball, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Tony. Good introduction because you hit it right. First, we're going to be talking about a non-native insect on our native ash and then a native nematode on our non-native pine. So we'll get into it, but the first thing I have to do is put this up because my phone is ringing off the hook and I'm getting text messages with pictures and I'm getting emails. I have a or spruce, short needle pine to some people. I have a spruce and it looked fine, and now suddenly the needles are dropping and turning color. Well, guess what? If you took your Christmas tree that you had in the house and you sat it outside in the yard, kind of like we do as a bird feeder, right now it's doing the same thing. And it doesn't have any roots. We had an incredible drought last year, as most of you know. We had an open, windy, and dry winter. And then the spring's not doing very well. And so, yes, people are correct. They're looking at these trees that are on the last legs just shedding needles. It is not an insect. It is not a disease. People are saying, well, this is needle cast. And yes, we do have needle cast disease out there. But on the small spruce that I've been getting pictures of, what this all is managed with the hose. But in this case, it's probably too late. But the calls are coming in for everybody on this problem right now. So, in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be dry in South Dakota. Every tree that's going in a windbreak better be getting almost a quart of water, and it almost needs it daily if it's going in the next 2 weeks because at 80 to 90 degree temperature, that's not the perfect time to be breaking bud on a bare root seedling in that. So water, water, water. I expect we're going to see more of this in the next week. But again, there's no chemical solution other than H2O, and a lot of these are a little far gone for it. But the call is they looked fine in the fall, and now they're going very quickly. Well, we'll go over emerald ash borer here, though, and we'll focus on that. Emerald ash borer is not bothered by our weather. The winter wasn't that cold in the Dakotas. Dry weather, they're fine in. If it stresses the tree, so much better for them. So everything is a plus for the drought for emerald ash borer. While it will attack any North American ash, it is particularly keen on attacking stressed ash because they are releasing volatiles that makes everyone aware of their attractiveness. And while they can kill, emerald ash borer can kill a healthy ash tree, North American ash tree, they're sure going to go after anything stressed, and just about everything stressed out there right now. Of course, in the Great Plains, we have a lot at risk because we have a lot of ash-lined streets still, much as we used to have elm-lined streets. Now we're having ash-lined streets that are disappearing at a faster rate. Many of our communities still have mature elms out there, not as many, but they're there. But you go through a community, and Canton's a good example, where emerald ash borer went through from confirmation to just about every tree dead in 5 years. Um, it's the only trees that are left are the ones that are being treated. And it certainly is a testament to treatments. They do work. But, you go out east, picture I took this week ago out in New York, you're looking at their native ash stands, and now they're having trees just tumbling and falling because no one's able to go out there and cut these trees down. We don't have quite the woods that they do out east, but everything's kind of shifted to the woods now. In town, the only ash are left are the ones that are being treated. They've already gone through this that we're going through. Now it's everything falling down in their forests. Well, where are we at for South Dakota, Nebraska, North Dakota, a little bit Iowa and Minnesota, since I know we have viewers over a wide area. It is in the Winnipeg area. It is in the Moorhead area. Oddly enough, and my picture doesn't show it right, it's not directly below uh, uh, Bismarck, and the close-up will show it better. But we do have a county in North Dakota which is isolated from everywhere else, but it was found at a rest stop. That ought to make everyone a little concerned. And then, of course, we have it in Brookings, South Dakota now. We have a gap. It's not been confirmed yet in Moody County. And then, of course, throughout Nebraska and further south. Again, if we take a look at South Dakota here, and even the adjoining Minnesota, Marshall County has it because, excuse me, Lyon County has it. It's in Marshall. It is in Brookings, South Dakota, but now I can find it outside the city as well. And then, of course, we're finding it in all the other areas that I mentioned there. I keep looking in Yankton and Clay County, have not found it yet, but I'm probably going to find it soon, by that in the next year or two. And again, this shows a little bit better, but there's the one spot in North Dakota, a rest area. And this is one of the usual ones in that it was actually found in the purple traps, the ones we've almost given up on. And so, you know what? It could be literally anywhere, and we just haven't found it yet. This thing can move as fast as a vehicle. And that's considering it was found at a rest area, that's more likely it's vector. These are the classic symptoms of an ash tree that's been infested for several years. What you have is a nice dark green tuft of water sprouts near the base. You have kind of a gap, a thin area above it, and then some foliage at the tips. That's almost classic EAB symptoms. Now, right now, some of the ash are breaking bud a little bit later. South Dakota right now is an experience where everything's condensing. I'm seeing everything from magnolias to lilacs in bloom at the same time. Not something we typically see. And so plants are just breaking bud at kind of unpredictable ways and times. Some of the ash on the streets look perfect. The the buds have opened, the leaves are coming out. You look at the next one, the buds are just opening. Now, the buds are just opening, but they're opening uniformly throughout the entire canopy. So it's not likely emerald ash borer. And obviously, I'm looking in communities where it hasn't been confirmed yet. So we're getting a lot more calls on EAB, but so far, not one of them has been EAB. The only symptom they're basing it on is the fact that, hey, it isn't leafed out yet and the neighbor tree has. Well, it's just a little behind, and in this weather, that's not a surprise. There's the emerald ash borer, not currently It's in the pupal stage right now, but this is what you find in the summer, winding back and forth, essentially girdling the tree and stopping the food manufactured by the leaves, getting to the roots. And so what happens is the roots go first. That's why you go out to New York and that in the forest, the trees are just toppling over because the root systems are gone. Of course, woodpeckers are our best indicators, and they will be blonding the trees. Now, again, occasionally woodpeckers will go after our natives and there'll be a peck here or there. And the squirrels are blonding trees. I've looked at a couple where the squirrels have actually taken it down to the sapwood, and people look up and say, "Oh my goodness, that's blonding." No, that's squirrels. They didn't take out just the outer layer of bark, which is what we refer to as blonding. They've taken out all the bark and revealing the sapwood. And woodpeckers won't be that frantic. So don't confuse squirrel injury, which was pretty heavy about a month ago on elms and ash and a number of other trees, with emerald ash borer, where it's more of this kind of mottled pattern here and there along the tree. And of course, if you pull that away, you'll find the galleries from emerald ash borer. They are serpentine galleries. Our native borers do not quite make them the same way. Theirs are more meandering and eventually go deeper into the tree. The other interesting thing is EAB kills the tissues around its galleries. I find that interesting because I don't see that with bronze birch borer, for example, and a nether related agralis. And I don't see it quite the same for our native ash borers. But if you find a gallery pattern and all the tissue dead around it, that's a pretty good indicator that it's probably emerald ash borer, though again, we do need to confirm it. During the summer, confirmation is relatively easy. You pull the bark away, you find those bell-shaped segments in an ash tree, and you know you're looking at emerald ash borer. But for a new county, in South Dakota, I have to find a life form to confirm it. The adults, we can utilize those. We have some areas in I think it was Lennox last year. People were sending me pictures. They were catching them in their hands. The population's getting that high in that area of the county. But the adults are not that big. You notice there in a fingerprint, about an eighth of an inch long, 16th of an inch wide. They will walk on your hand. They will even play dead occasionally, but if you try to catch one on the side of the tree, they're very good at taking off. But occasionally they'll light on you during heavy infestations. This is the one that people typically send me as emerald ash borer. It's one of the jewel beetles. It's closely rated, but it's not it. This is going after dead and dying trees. It does have kind of that mottled, shiny appearance, and think of it as a very wide EAB. But it's a flat-headed borer, but it's not the emerald ash borer. Well, the emerald ash borers will be emerging soon from their D-shaped holes, maybe sooner than normal. Right now, southern part of South Dakota is just across the 400 growing degree days. Emerald ash borer emerges at 550, and they're gaining about 50 growing degree days a week. So it might be a little before Memorial Day, which would be a little earlier than normal. But if this heat keeps up, we may see it coming out just a little bit sooner. Again, it will be emerging from the very crisp D-shaped holes. So what can we do? Well, we can treat trees. And if you go through any communities where they're doing treatments, you'll find those are the only trees left. Treatments do work. They're highly effective if done by professionals that are doing them correctly. And by and large, that's the case. Always get some references if you want. Take a look at their work, but we have a lot of good companies in the eastern South Dakota area that are providing treatments, and I certainly encourage people to hire someone rather than buying something over the counter, which will not be nearly as effective. I'm just showing a picture of one system. There are multiple systems, and if they're used properly, they all can work. So I'm not so much worried about how they're injecting, but as long as they're doing it correctly. But the when. Well, we're now into the when. Injections should really start when the buds are starting to open and the leaves are coming out. And the reason I say that is that ash builds its plumbing system every spring before it leaves out. Water uptake is primarily in the newest growth ring. And of course, that's what's going to carry the chemical throughout the tree as well. You can drill deeper in the tree and it'll be a sponge, but it won't move as well. So what you're doing here is you're waiting till that plumbing system's built. You inject the tree and it's going to be taken up very quickly and moved throughout. So I really like delaying until the buds are starting to open, which they are now, almost anywhere in South Dakota. The other reason I'd like to see the injections done early is that if you get the chemical in the leaves, you're going to kill mom before she lays eggs. And if an EAB happens to lay eggs on that tree without feeding on the leaves, didn't want a salad before it went to egg laying, the young larvae will be killed before they do any damage. They're almost threading their way through the tissue, and that's really not harming anything, or at least not a major harm. Ash are tough. And by the way, injections do not cause injury to the tree. Tree I cut down yesterday, we're doing a study on it, that internal heartwood is due to earlier injuries, mostly mower blight, which has stopped. But if you take a look, this is an arbor jet system, and you can see that it's enclosed over every one of these. Again, if someone knows what they're doing and does the system properly, it will work and works very well as the rainbow systems and a couple of others out there. So what are we looking at? First adults emerge, then the females feed on the leaves before laying eggs. And by the way, she continues to feed on leaves between egg laying. So she might lay eggs on this tree, fly to another tree, munch on leaves, and lay eggs. So having chemical in the leaves is great protection for the whole season. And again, once the chemicals have been put in properly, you have 2 seasons of control. Well, the eggs appear about 2 weeks after the adult emergence begins. And then the eggs hatch in about 10 days, with the first larvae appearing about 3 to 4 weeks after emergence begins. And so if you take a look at some of the ways we can look at it, Airwood viburnum blooms at about 535. When it's blooming, EAB is just about getting ready to emerge. For us, black locust is timed perfectly. When black locust starts blooming, it's at 550 growing degree days, and EABs are starting to emerge. Now, they emerge throughout June. Peak is usually about the third week of June. So they don't all come out at once, but they'll start usually for us right after Memorial Day. We hit 550. And then when you start seeing Wichelias blooming, you're a little past that. So those are kind of the ranges as to when to start to expect emerald ash borers to begin flying. And it can take 30 days from application to appearing in the crown. Now, it can be quicker. I'm not saying it's always 30. But if you use that as the, okay, we're going to get complete distribution within 30 days of my application, you're doing a very conservative estimate. And by the way, the next year the chemical is already there being sequestered and then will be released. So you don't have to have that 30-day window. When the leaves are opening, the chemical's going to start moving out to them right away. So if we take a look at this, what you're going to see is if you put the chemical in as the leaves are coming out, they should be there by the time the females are beginning to feed. Not necessarily when the adults are emerging, because they don't feed on their way out. But it should be throughout the canopy by the time the females are feeding and beginning to lay eggs. So we have plenty of time to get through that. Well, what else can we do? We can reduce the ash population. We're still seeing that in South Dakota. We have a lot of small communities that are doing as we recommend. Remove the ash that nobody wants. the ash that's old, the ash that's declining. Do not remove all the ash. Ash is still an important tree, and we don't want to lose it entirely. But you have to be selective, surgical, I'm telling communities, as to what trees you treat. There's a lot of parks out there that have gorgeous large ash. We don't want to lose those. We have trees in the streets that are the same way and trees in backyards. So what we're asking communities to do is you might as well start getting ahead of the game, particularly if you're in eastern South Dakota, and start removing the old ash on a selective basis and over the next couple of years so that you're not faced with a lot of work in a very short time period. Dakota Dunes is probably our best at that. We did an inventory in 19 and 20. We started marking trees for them, set up a plan. Here's how much you're going to remove every year. We've been out there every spring marking trees for removal so that they don't all disappear at once. So we go through and take a look at what area of town to be doing from time to time each year. And I will say this, they replant. In other words, trees come down that spring, the trees are planted that spring. And I will say that's a gap I see in a lot of communities. They will get out there and take down the trees. They have to. Can't leave standing dead ash. But they don't follow up with planting very quickly. And really, that is necessary. So we're not left with towns that essentially have nothing left. And I will say Dakota Dunes, with their planting efforts since 2021, you're already, and they've planted some fairly good sizes, you can see, and they budgeted for the maintenance of these trees, principally watering. And so they're actually getting some nice looking trees coming back. We do drones for identifying ash. This is it in midsummer. You can easily see every ash that's infested. In fact, you can see them easier with a drone than you can walking. And so this is becoming a real good means of surveying communities because it can be done very quickly. But what I'm showing you is just over to the side here on the right. That's not an ash. That's a Scots pine. And quite frankly, we're losing more Scots pines in the state to pine wilt than we're losing ash to emerald ash borer because pine wilt is throughout the state of South Dakota. So a little bit on pine wilt too. Now, as Tony mentioned earlier, now we're kind of reversing it. We're looking at our non-native pines, primarily Scots pines and Austrian pines, though large mugos, which we tend to call Swiss mountain pines, can also become infested by large, more than 10 or 15 feet. That seems to attract the Sawyer beetles more, and so they can become infested. But on these trees, they can go very quickly, the infest trees, to just wilting. Now, we do see what I've called lingering. We've had Scots pines and Austrian pines that they don't die the fall that they're infested. In other words, they're infested during the summer. They don't die that fall. Part of it is still green. And then the following spring, they'll go. And by the way, the symptoms look completely different from diplodia tip blight. I'll reverse just to show this. Oops. That is pine wilt. You'll notice the needles just hang. And by the way, the twigs are fairly crisp. With diplodia tip blight, you'll notice you still see some live tips, do you not? And yes, you're losing needles, but since it's a tip blight, the laterals will take over. So you will get this discoloration, you will get browning of needles, but you'll always find these live tips. And diplodia is very common in ponderosa pine, which is not really affected by pine wilt. And it's very common in Austrian pine, which is affected by pine wilt. And guess what? There's no rule saying you can't have both at the same time for an Austrian pine. If it has both, it's going to die. The diplodia won't kill it, but the pine wilt certainly will. So in this case, again, we're looking at exotic trees and a native pathogen. Again, the trees typically go very quickly. Summer, they look green. By fall, they're dead. There's an Austrian pine late summer, and of course, by that fall, it's gone. And now the next one's gone as well. Here was probably one of the best pictures I have. This is in the summer looking at Scots pines in Yankton a couple of years ago, and you can just see some discoloration, can't you? Now, by the way, you can't just go out and prune it out. The nematode is already throughout the tree at this point. But it is, you know what, that tree's going to die. And sure enough, that's the same tree 3 months later, all the whole row. So typically it goes very quick and the trees are dead that fall. But sometimes they'll hang around through the next spring and die. When you cut them down, the wood's dry and light. It's not sappy. It's not going to be sticky. And since the Sawyer beetles that carry the nematode to a new host also carry blue stain fungus, which, by the way, the nematode feeds on. But the blue stain also helps plug up the tracheids that carry the water. So the trees die very quickly. The nematode plugs up the resin. So you don't have that resin, that pitch that the tree uses for protection. And the blue stain fungus helps plug up the tracheids so it dries out quickly as dry wood. And your hands aren't even going to get sticky on these. You can pick up whole logs. They're almost kiln dried. But as I mentioned, it's vectored by a Sawyer beetle. Now, what's interesting is right now, the Sawyer beetles that are becoming adults actually release a chemical that attracts the nematodes to them. Isn't that amazing? It's like calling for a flight. Okay, gate 12, everybody. It's leaving. And the nematodes will hop on. Some estimates 12,000. Poor graduate student had to count them, but nevertheless, those are some of the estimates that a single Sawyer beetle can carry. And they're going to carry them in another tree. And when they're making their egg niches, that little chew mark, the nematodes can be released. They can also be released when they're just nibbling at the bases of needles. So you may not see this in a tree, but quite often you'll find these egg niches in an infested tree. And of course, you're going to find the Sawyer beetle larvae during the summer. The grubs, because they can get fairly large, that are also burrowing through the tree, taking advantage of its dying host. This is the current estimate as to where it's found in our region. It's not found in northern Minnesota yet. It's been there a long time. It was in Owatonna, I think, in '84. I remember it. South Dakota, it's moved through the whole state. I don't care where you are, I can find dying belts of Scots pines and Austrian pines. It's also through Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and points east. We've not confirmed it yet in North Dakota. If they have, it's been very recent. They've sent us samples for our lab, and we've not found it yet. But as our summer is warm, it is more likely to be found there because what it requires is a mean July temperature above 70 degrees. You might say, well, it gets hotter than that. We're talking about a mean temperature. And believe it or not, its progress moving north in our state has closely followed those lines. As our summers have become slightly warmer, the trees are left more susceptible to the nematode. And so if this trend continues, we're certainly going to find it in North Dakota at some point. And of course, as we move through South Dakota, this is stands of Austrian pines down in Yankton. This is '05. You can see it's almost burned through all of them then. Was finding it in Watertown by about 2014. And that's a Scots pine block out at the Big Sioux Nursery. Now they have all these different seed sources. And guess what? It didn't matter. This killed them all. It just doesn't really matter to what seed source. So what do? You can treat them, but you have to treat healthy pines. The treatments are fairly expensive, more expensive than emerald ash borer treatments. And unfortunately, the larger the tree, the less effective they are. These are not like emerald ash borer where it's the gold standard. It's done right, they are like the 99%. But with this, it can fall into the 60 to 70% range. And I know a lot of companies out there that do not provide the treatments anymore because they've had losses, or provide the treatments, but the landowner, homeowner has to sign that the tree may still die. Now, again, it's a measure of protection. So it doesn't mean not to do it, but it doesn't quite have that effectiveness that we found with Dutch elm disease treatments, or that we found with emerald ash borer treatments, particularly in the larger pines. But once the tree is infested, the only thing you can do is burn it. Now, notice that's a month ago. You want to get out there and cut and burn the trees before the Sawyer beetles left. Since they're still leaving, if that can be done, go ahead. Don't stack this as firewood. Even debarking doesn't totally eliminate it, because they often pupate a little further in, and they're emerging. They're not feeding. So if you can, now there's burn bans in a lot of areas because of the high wind and high temperatures. Some I know I've gone out and buried these in a pit. That's effective as well. But I've also seen this. Somebody cuts down the trees, they drive them out, pile it in another Scots pine shelter belt, and guess what? The next year, a lot of those trees are infested as well. So don't move the wood. Take a look at this. Here's two trees that last fall were infested, but you couldn't see it. And this last week of hot weather, they went very quickly. Now, by the way, don't leave stumps. In a stump that size, if left, I can find nematodes in it and Sawyer beetles leaving it. So you don't have to grind the stump out, but cut it flush with the ground. I've had it where I've gone out and said, boy, that's pretty sure that has pinewood nematode. And when I drive back, they've already cut the trees down, but they've left a stump that high, and I'm able to extract the nematodes from the stump. So when you're going out there and cutting the trees down, make sure you cut them flush with the ground. That's as much as you have to do, and dispose of the wood rather than just stack it somewhere. I wanted to leave time for questions today because most of you know all these basics. But I do want to go over a little bit about a new pest that's not here yet, and that's a spotted lanternfly. This is a little different than the matrix that Tony and I discussed, exotic tree, native pest, vice versa. This is exotic tree, exotic insect. Now, the spotted lanternfly isn't a fly and it's not a moth. It's more related to our tree hoppers than that. It's a sucking insect that came from Asia, accidentally introduced, of course, and it's become a major problem out east. Not so much a tree killer, though vineyards it can become a problem, and in orchards it can become a problem, but just a nuisance, particularly in campgrounds and other recreational areas. The adults are out in late summer, fall, so you won't be seeing those yet. But what happens is during the year, the nymphal stages, as they're feeding, are sucking sap from the tree. And as they insert their beak and feed there and move to something else, where they fed will continue to drip sap. And obviously, where they're feeding will drip sap. Look at this. This is where they've already gone and fed and pulled out and moved. They continue to drip sap, which is a major annoyance. And of course, since it's feeding in the phloem, it's producing honeydew, the insect is. And that honeydew, that sweet, sugary substance that drips out of them, okay, covers everything. It's one of my friends. They were having a wedding out at the place, and the lanternflies were so thick, it was dripping down on everything, and that becomes infected with a sooty mold. And so you've got all your yard furniture, your car, your windows, everything else beneath the trees covered in the sticky black film. Now, what's out right now are the egg masses. And that's what an egg mass looks like. Everybody's finger to give you an idea. And I took this picture out in Maryland, so it's not close. But as you can see here, there's all the eggs. The eggs are hatching right now. And there's a picture I took 2 weeks ago of the little nymphs out there that are beginning to move, beginning to hatch, and look at them. They almost look like little clowns. In fact, they're described that way. Now, the interesting thing is the first couple of instars, they have to feed on leaves. They can't push their way, their beak into twigs and that. And they'll feed on just about everything. Walnut, a number of other trees, again, grapevines. But the fourth instar does much better in growth and reproduction as adults if it feeds on tree of heaven. So you really need tree of heaven to get this to become a major problem. If you have tree of heaven, which we do have, looks a lot like walnut, but has those two little glands at the base of every leaflet. You can have a serious problem with this insect, particularly by late season. Your adults will be emerging from it. They like to lay eggs on it as well. And of course, the adults just die everywhere in the fall and they just litter everything. Well, at first, APHA said, well, you don't have tree of heaven out there in South Dakota, so you're not going to have the problem. I said, guess again. There's a tree of heaven in Yankton. There's a tree of heaven in Yankton, and I can't even put my arms around it, so big. So Yankton, after it went through Dutch elm disease, and as soon, we haven't confirmed it there, will go through emerald ash borer. After all that, yep, you're going to have lanternfly. Good for you. Which will become a recreational mess. But there's the leaves. It's got those two little glands at the base of each leaflet. So that's a good way to ID it. It produces all these samaras too on the female trees. So you may not find them if you're looking, of course, at a male tree. I can find them as far north as Sioux Falls. They're used as a street tree in Pierre, believe it or not. I can find them in Kadoka along the streets as well. They've naturalized along our river system from Pierre all the way down to Dakota Dunes. You're looking at tree of heaven, a whole little forest of them down along the river in Chamberlain, and they're thick between Yankton and Vermilion along the rivers. And there they are, Dakota Dunes. I took a picture of them. You go to the point. And so what am I recommending? Now, the good thing here is if you got a park and you go out there, remove all the tree of heaven within about 3 miles of the park, these don't really travel very easily. So essentially, you've stopped a lot of the movement. I won't say it's perfect, but it helps. Unfortunately, you can't just cut the trees down and walk away because they'll sprout vigorously. So what's done is, late winter, early spring, they cut the trees down and then spray the stump with glyphosate. And if they do that, they can keep it from sprouting and literally kill the tree. And so there's going to be some of our communities, not right now because they're dealing with EAB or preparing for it, that, maybe a decade from now, we're going to have to go out there and start managing for tree of heaven. And again, if they can get to it earlier, might as well go ahead because this will become a recreational mess more than just a tree problem. And this is the current distribution. It may be further west into Nebraska than what I'm illustrating here. You don't find it very much in Minnesota. It doesn't like the cold and apparently doesn't like lutefisk. So it's kind of stayed out of that state. But as I've noted there, I can find it throughout western South Dakota and along our rivers, which is where we have orchards, vineyards, and a lot of recreation. So I thought I'd finish on another bad note and say this is a pest to keep your eye out for. And I'm going to back this up real quickly. because in the spring, if you find something that looks like that on a tree, you want to give me a call in South Dakota because I certainly want to come out and take a look. Now, by the way, after they hatch, you can still find them. Notice they look like little corrugated cardboard in that. But if you find a tree of heaven and you find this on that smooth bark, take a picture. Let me see it. And I'll be more than happy to come down. I think right now it's all the way out to Chicago because if the eggs are laid on recreational vehicles on that, they overwinter and the recreational vehicle comes out, eggs hatch, and now you have the problem. But most of the egg hatches in the spring. So it's right now that we're seeing it. So with that, there we go. As Tony mentioned, and you don't need to copy that down for your ISA credits, at least this time. Make sure you did put up your ISA credentials for this live broadcast, and Tony's going to submit them all for you. Thank you, Tony, for doing that. I appreciate it. So for everyone, we've got some time here. I'm going to stop sharing the slides and click that. And Tony, do we have any questions?
Yeah, it looks like some are trickling in here. Kathy's curious, are arborvitae susceptible to pine wilt as hers look windburned?
And they probably are wind burned. Winter desiccation injuries really bad on arborvitae this year. No, to the answer to the question, pinewood nematode is really only a tree killer in pines. Having said that, occasionally they're found in Doug fir, for example. And by the way, they are found in fire damaged and dying ponderosa pines. But to be a tree killer, it's going to be our exotic pines and our exotic pines that are more than 10 or 12 feet tall. That's why in Michigan, where we found it there back in the 80s, it didn't really impact our Christmas tree plantations as much because they're harvesting the trees when they're 6 feet tall.
Don't have any other questions at
Oh,
this point. Very thorough today, I think, Dr. Ball. One last call for ISA or SAF credentials in the chat box. I did put the YouTube playlist link in there. I checked, there's actually 20 videos for you to look at. So almost an entire day's worth of video content out there related to South Dakota trees and pests. Plenty to learn. Please take a look at that as you are able.
and then
You
for
know,
everybody, oops, I'm sorry, Tony, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but everybody, again, the winter burn calls are just coming in. If you're getting pines, arborvitae, spruce, um, and someone says, well, it seems to have appeared, that's probably what you're looking at. This is was massication an acceptable alternative to burning slash hills during? Yes, and I think you're probably in relationship to um, the engraver beetles. Um, it's as a better than nothing. Right now, the Ips beetles have been emerging. We've gotten consistent 60-degree temperatures. It has been a little cooler in the hills, so it's not quite as fast, but they're emerging from the wood now. And so if all you do is massacate it right now, you may find that they're coming up. And one of the interesting things is they will overwinter in the duff. And I've literally seen it where somebody comes out and starts grinding up all the slash there that's laid down to disturb the duff layer. And they're just almost like a cloud coming out. You didn't create them, you just gave them kind of like earthworms coming up after the rain. So we would prefer that everything been masticated by last January, so it would have had time to dry out. But nope, it's better than nothing. So I'll say that.
Doak writes, does the limber pine have pine wilt resistance?
There's not a lot of them out there, but as much as I've seen, it does. Now, occasionally it does show up in white pine. And, the question there is, well, was the white pine stressed? And this just came in and helped finish it off, which is what I suspect, because it's not a major problem out east in their native white pines. And I think that's probably going to be the same true with limber pine, is if it's a stressed limber pine and declining, I'm willing to bet Sawyer beetles are attacking it, and I'm willing to bet you will find the nematode in there and it's contributing to the decline, but it's not a primary agent as it is on the Austrian and Scots pines.
Now, Shad
Okay,
has a question about EAB.
sure.
Does emerald ash borer exhibit any feeding tendencies, such as feeding and laying eggs higher up in host trees after initial infestations, and then subsequent generations feeding and laying eggs progressively lower in the canopy?
Yes, and that's a good observation. Emerald ash borer is like a cat. It likes sunny, warm locations, and that's why early on it tends to hit the higher canopies. Why? They're more sunlit, both for feeding and for egg laying. And then as the canopy becomes more open as it's dying back the second year of the infestation, yeah, you'll find them lower and lower and lower until finally they're on the trunk. Again, as I always tell people, D-shaped holes don't you can't walk through community and say, well, I'm not finding D-shaped holes down the bottom of these trees that otherwise look healthy. No, you're not going to find D-shaped holes that low until the tree's dead. So you don't need to look up. But yes, early infestations up in canopies because they're going for the sunlight. Good question.
Well, I don't see any more questions in the box right now. And then as soon as I say that, one pops in. So, how about do dead pines fall over if they're not cut down?
Well, I'll have to say yes, they certainly do, but not very quickly. That doesn't mean you should leave them and they're not a hazard. But it's not like the emerald ash borer that kills off the roots almost first, so the trees topple. I can show you ghost windbreaks where the Scots pines were killed off 4 years ago, and the trees are still standing there. Uh, they begin to fall now, of course, and branches break off them. But it's kind of a slow collapse rather than a faster one. And then the other one I saw, uh, the tree of heaven suckers profusely. And that's why just cutting the tree down doesn't do anything because it'll sprout. And if you go out and take a look at those groves of tree of heaven, they're all connected. They're all from some mother trees. Does propagate from seed rather easily. So those seeds will fall, alleyways on the sides of, little sides of houses where we end up seeing Siberian elms come up. That's where tree of heaven will come up as well. But the suckering is the real problem. They can spread very quickly by that means.
Well, I think that's all we have for questions right now as we are signing off here. If one pops in,
Okay.
I think we still got time to answer it. But thank you everybody for joining us. We had another 60 people on the call today. Very helpful questions that we had. I have all of the ISA credentials that were added to the chat. I made sure to double and triple check those. So I will do what I can to report those and we'll proceed next month accordingly. That said, please do join us next month. We'll have a flyer out in the coming weeks on our topic and date for the June Forest Health Workshop. But with that, Dr. Ball, any last words?
Well, I saw there was one last question that popped up, and no, once they're standing dead and dry, they're no longer a threat. The nematode has to have living host material. It kills it as part of it, but that's when it picks up and leaves by the Sawyer beetles. So, all right, everybody have a good one and stay cool this weekend.